Hey there everyone, welcome to the Advanced Kraber-AP Sniper Guide. First things first, if you haven't seen the basic guide, check the link in the description or follow the annotation that's on your screen right now. That's going to be your basic primer for being successful with the Kraber, and if you've already seen that, well, let's get started. First, let's lay down the ground rules. Then, I'll outline how I personally apply the Kraber, and then we'll tie that into some basic practice and warm-up recommendations to build confidence and muscle memory before you go into real games. First things first, rule number 1 of the Kraber. Never stop moving. You hold an extremely slow-firing but precise weapon capable of one-shot kills anywhere in an enemy's body from any range. You don't have the time or the leeway to be slowly lurking around and trying to engage enemies in fair gunfights, so get that carbine mentality out of your head right now. To be effective with this weapon, proper movement is absolutely required. Constant wall running and bunny hopping with momentum has to be second nature to you. For example, you have to be able to do things like aiming down sights with a Spitfire, firing it in full automatic, keeping your bullets on target past 20 meters, all while bunny hopping after a series of wall runs and keeping your velocity high. If you're able to do all this simultaneously, then yes, you can perform pretty well with the Kraber. If you can't juggle all these things at once, then you need to work on your fundamentals more before you try and pick up a Kraber. There's just other kind of skills that you need to be good at before you can apply this very, very well. Rule number 2 of the Kraber is that mid-range is your friend. Point-blank ranges are a crapshoot. It's awesome when you happen to get kills, but awful when you have enemies that are competent enough to outgun you, which is basically 99% of the time. So there's a special range that you can apply the Kraber in, and you're only going to really learn this through practice. And in this range, the Kraber still feels like it's hit scan. You know, you're close enough that the travel time is essentially negligible, and you just don't really feel it, and you can just point and click. Easy, right? Rule number 3 of the Kraber. You may only break rule number 1 in cases of extreme emergency. Enemy got your flag and you need a Hail Mary. You see a guy running a straight line 50 meters away and you're positive that nobody's got their sights on you and you can stop and take that shot, then go for it. Stop, plant your feet and take the shot, and you gotta scurry your ass away pronto. You can't be standing around and trying to take 3-4 shots with the Kraber. You're just gonna get yourself killed and you're not gonna be helping your team. Rule number 4 of the Kraber, your body movement is your friend. Only aim with your mouse when you actually really need to. If you can use your bodily movements with WASD to aim, then use those. This is exactly how people who play very aim-heavy weapons in other games function, for example Scout and Team Fortress 2. And there's no reason you shouldn't do it too, especially when taking air shots, jump shots, and drop shots. So now that we're done with laying down the ground rules, it's time to take a look at how we can practice with the Kraber and get better with it outside of real games. So the whole point of doing this is to build muscle memory and build confidence with the Kraber. So by the time we actually do go into quote-unquote real games, we don't have to be thinking about this stuff actively. It's all going to be passive, second nature, and it's just going to flow from our hands as opposed to being like some contrived, you know, like, okay, I gotta jump here, I gotta quickscope this guy, you know, I gotta, you know, just, you know, if you're even thinking that, then you're not comfortable enough with it. It has to flow just like it would with any other weapon. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that this weapon isn't hit scan. You know, there is a travel time to your shots. So first things first is we need to learn how to lead our shots. So I think, in my opinion, that it's fairly easy to learn based on audio cues. So like if you're at close range, then your shots is going to be like, you know, it's going to be like that. Whereas if you're at a medium range, then, you know, from the time you shoot to the time it hits your target, it's going to be more like... And then if you go to really long ranges, it's going to be more like... I know that's a really crude way of explaining it, I'm just tapping my desk, but that makes sense to me. You know, just trying to think in my head, you know, like what those audio cue differences are going to be allow me to really judge distances and judge how much I need to lead targets. Now, if something else works better for you, then you can go for it, but in my personal opinion, that's what works for me. So, you know, just sit down and try and practice some of those ranges and, you know, and just listen to the noises between when you fire your Kraber and when your bullet actually strikes a wall or a target. And try to just memorize those, and then you can apply them later on. So, in my opinion, the best way to learn the feel of the Kraber, at least when you're very, very first starting out with it, is to practice it on grunts. So they often stand still, and you'd be surprised how often that you miss those targets even when they're standing still and they're moving. So here's what you should do, is grab a buddy and load up Overlook and head over to the central hallway. A lot of grunts are going to be spawning there constantly throughout the entire course of the game. They just love that middle hallway. So that's going to be your training ground. It's perfect for a lot of reasons, and I'll kind of go through those one at a time as we make our way through the guide. Briefly, let's talk about class loadout. Stim is pretty much your only choice in tactical ability, since we need to be mobile and we need to be able to tank damage, so we can get our one single shot off, especially versus carbine users who are the bane of our existence. For your optics, you have to use whatever is the most comfortable for you. I like AOG, but I have a friend who likes to use a full zoom scope, and he uses it just as acrobatically and crazily as I do sometimes. So you can check out his clips playing now just to see what that looks like, and if that's something that you'd rather do, then go for it. You know, the full zoom scope technically would have a little bit more of a use than the AOG would, since you can use it at longer ranges more effectively. But you know, it all comes down to your own personal preference. For your secondary, that's also your choice. In my opinion, the auto pistol is the best, but if you're confident with the wingman, that's awesome too, since it can make up for your ultra long range kills, and it can get you the nearly impossible gooser kills. At least they're nearly impossible with the Kraber. With the wingman, they're just a little bit less so. Oh, and satchels for your ordnance, since they're amazing and they're the best for following up missed shots if you don't have the balls to wait for a fresh shot to be recycled in your Kraber. So with all of our class stuff finally out of the way, let's list our advanced tactics and go through them one at a time. So the first thing that we're going to look at is quickscoping. Quickscoping is in itself pretty self-explanatory. So instead of holding your right mouse button to aim down your sights, waiting for the AOG's wiggle effect to come to rest, and then taking a shot, instead you kind of need to learn the timing for when your red dot is first appearing on your screen and then taking a shot right at that instant. So you can practice this pretty simply by running around some grunts on the ground, bringing up your sights, and then taking shots. So you need to get comfortable with this timing and work your way out to longer and longer ranges over time. You should be able to do this with reasonable accuracy and consistency out to at least 10 meters, but preferably something more like 15. Now, I'm not asking you to be a YOLO Swagget MLG pro here, but you need to really spend time committing this to muscle memory so it becomes second nature. You want to get to the point where wherever you see movement that you aren't immediately sure is a grunt, that you're able to quickscope that target and shoot first and ask questions later. Next up, swipe shots. Now swipe shots, or more widely known as drag shots, are pretty self-explanatory as well. So instead of trying to swing your aim on top of an enemy, stopping right on their chest and then shooting, just make a big swiping or dragging motion over them, and then fire your weapon when the red dot crosses their face. Easy. So that's really all there is to it. If you've ever played Gears of War, for example, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. That was one of the most widely used tactics for popping heads in that game, and it applies to Titanfall just as well, although you don't have to aim for the head. You can just aim for anywhere on their body and just drag right across it and mash your face on your fire button when you're ready to shoot, and you're probably going to get a kill. It's pretty simple. Next up, let's talk about the jump shot. So generally in first-person shooters, and I'm looking at you, Halo, jumping in a gunfight is a really, really terrible idea. It throws you in a predictable arc that your enemies can take advantage of to kill you, like, with no effort whatsoever. However, we can use these in Titanfall as kind of a Russian roulette, especially with our ability to jump either early, on time, meaning at the apex of our jump, or really late. We have mix-ups in both our timing and direction, meaning that there is some semblance of mind games and an evasive factor to all of our jumps. But why is this important? How can this help me be better with the Kraber? Well, there's a key phrase that I want you to really focus on. Jumping throws you into a predictable arc. Didn't you just get done saying why that's bad? Yeah, but there's also a lot of reasons why it's really good too, so listen on. We can use this arc to our advantage to better leverage positions from which to take our shots. Enemy lateral movements, meaning their left and right movements, start to feel less pronounced when we're firing down at them from about 15 degrees up in the air. In addition to this, it eliminates any disagreements between your fingers and your mouse. You're foregoing rapid evasive movement for one large predictable movement, so your mind can focus on only your mouse and moving that where it needs to be to pick up your kill, or your right thumbstick, or whatever it is you controller players use to aim, I don't know. Or, if you're positioned perfectly, sometimes you don't have to do anything after you jump. Just wait for your sights to naturally fall on an enemy, and then just pull the trigger when it's appropriate. So I know it sounds kind of silly and contrived, but you're just going to have to trust me on this one, that when you put this into practice, your effectiveness has the potential to skyrocket. This is probably my most used technique by far, and I'm sure that it shows in a lot of the clips that I share. Next up, things are getting a little bit more difficult, or are they? Air shots. So this sounds similar to a jump shot, right? Well, not really. They're almost opposites, actually. We need to keep in mind that when performing these free-running abilities, our movement velocity is going to be very, very high. So this doesn't mean anything at all if we're fighting an enemy parallel to our velocity vector. So what we want to do is try to position ourselves to be attacking enemies from angles anywhere between 10 and 170 degrees. Basically, to simplify that even more, we want to try to fly perpendicular to where we need to be shooting whenever possible, therefore completely eliminating the necessity for focusing on body movement and left to right aim. This means that you've only got to focus on up-down and pressing the big left mouse button or that big right trigger whenever you see the big red dot on your screen cross your opponent's little tiny chest. Easy, right? You better agree with me, because this is by far your most effective and most stylish tool by far. You might be in a predictable arc in the air, but you're moving really, really, really fast, and you're still hard to track, and you only need one hit to kill an enemy versus an enemy's like 4 or 5 or sometimes 6 with a carbine. So yeah, you just gotta make your one-shot count, and you're gonna be really glad that you chose the Kraber in this sort of application. Finally, let's talk about drop shots briefly. Now, you might know this name as meaning other things in other games, and quite frankly, I don't care. I'm assigning it a new meaning for Titanfall for my own purposes, and it's going to be one of your most important anti-camp tools in the entire game. So what you're going to want to do is chain triple jumps into bunker busting death blows. So you got an enemy that's, let's say he's camping on top of a building, who you know isn't moving around much, and you can't see him from the ground normally. What you're going to want to do is perform a max height double jump, meaning that you fire your jump kit at the apex of your natural jump, and then at that apex of the second jump, you hit a nearby wall, and you snap to it as if you're going to wall run, but instead of wall running, you jump off it a third time and then use your jump kit to fly up in the air even higher. So this is a technique that can be used to scale all sorts of buildings in the game just for mobility purposes, but now we're going to combine it with the Kraber just to bust campers, and just completely blow them up and make it impossible for them to do what they want to do, or at least take your own revenge on them. So this technique gets its name from me personally, since, well, by the time you acquire your target and you're quickscoping him in midair, you're going to be falling back down to earth and potentially saving yourself from immediate retaliation should you miss your shot. In conclusion, don't think that these few tactics are the only things that you can accomplish with the Kraber. These are your fundamentals, your bread and butter. Spend your time learning them, but don't be afraid to take risks in real games. Once you feel like you've got it down, congrats, you passed stationary target school. Now it's time to focus on those predictably moving specters. A word of caution though, just don't get too caught up in all the practicing of your spots. Don't forget that we are learning this to fight enemy pilots, not just to dominate enemy grunts with style, so don't be afraid to hop into real games. Yes, your kill death is going to obviously suffer for a few couple days, maybe even a week or two, depending on how much you actually play this game, but once the Kraber starts to click, there's no going back. It's honestly just way too much fun to put down once you get even reasonably good with it. I know a handful of people who've been using it, and they've all had a certain game that popped up out of nowhere, where they just completely randomly put up a 13-0 with the Kraber only, and, you know, they just suddenly just go insane, they go nuts, they go bananas with it. So, if you keep practicing, it's gonna happen to you, and it's a great feeling once it does. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope that you've learned a lot of new things, or at least been refreshed and find some inspiration in the clips presented. Please leave me a comment down below to let me know how you're progressing with your own Kraber training. Like and share this video if you feel so inclined. And this has been, to date, the most work that I've put into any single Titanfall video, so I hope that it really shows. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.